She sat down before I even looked up. I did not invite her. I did not recognize her. I did not know her name, her face, or why she chose the empty seat right beside me when there were at least 6 other open chairs in that café. She did not pick up a menu. She did not signal the server. She just sat there, close enough that I could smell her perfume. Something sharp and floral, the kind that lingers after a person leaves. I remember looking down at my coffee, thinking maybe she was waiting for someone. Maybe she had mistaken me for a friend. Maybe she was just tired. But then she leaned in, just slightly, and her voice came out low and even, like she had rehearsed the sentence 100 times before she walked through that door. Your sister asked me to tell you this, but your husband must not know. I did not move. I did not breathe. My fingers stayed wrapped around that coffee cup like it was the only solid thing in the room. She placed a small white envelope on the table between us, slid it toward me with 2 fingers, and stood up without ever making full eye contact. By the time I turned to look at her, she was already at the door, and then she was gone. I sat there for a long moment staring at that envelope. The cafe noise continued around me. Spoons against ceramic, someone laughing near the window, a chair scraping the floor. Life going on, completely indifferent to the fact that mine had just shifted underneath me. And what was inside that envelope almost destroyed everything. My name is Maya. Maya Aldrich. I am 38 years old. I've been married for 9 years to a man named Garrett, and up until that Tuesday morning in October, I genuinely believed I had a quiet and stable life. Not perfect, no life is, but honest. That was the word I would have used. Honest. I need you to understand something about Garrett before I tell you the rest of this. He is the kind of man who seems easygoing on the surface. He laughs easily. He is generous with his time and his attention. The type who remembers what your coworker's dog is named and asks about it 3 months later. People love Garrett. Women especially find him charming. And over the years I had learned to live with the small flicker of something uneasy that came with watching a room light up when he walked in. But I trusted him. That is what I kept telling myself in those early years. I trusted him because he had never given me a reason not to. Not one I could point to. Not one I could name. And then there was my sister. Lorraine is 2 years younger than me, and she has spent most of her life being the version of me that people find easier to be around. She is lighter in conversation, quicker to laugh, more comfortable in rooms full of people. Where I am careful, she is spontaneous. Where I hold back, she walks in as though every space was designed for her arrival. People describe her as magnetic. I have always thought the more accurate word was calculated. We were never truly close. Not in the deep and confiding way that some sisters are. We had the kind of relationship that looks fine from the outside. Holiday dinners, birthday calls, the occasional coffee that neither of us initiated with much enthusiasm. There was no dramatic falling out between us. No single moment I could point to and say, that is when everything changed. It was more like a slow accumulation of small things. The comments that seemed like compliments until you replayed them at 2 in the morning. The way she looked at Garrett sometimes, just a beat too long. The way she always found a reason to bring up my marriage in conversations that had nothing to do with it. Garrett seems a little stressed lately, she said once over the phone. I had not even mentioned Garrett. He looked tired at Mom's dinner, she said another time. Is everything okay between you two? I always said yes. Because everything was fine. Because I had no reason to believe otherwise. Lorraine and Garrett got along well. Too well, I sometimes thought, but I never said that out loud because saying it out loud would make me the paranoid wife, the jealous sister, the woman who turned family harmony into a problem. So I kept that feeling folded up inside me and I learned to ignore the weight of it. Until the envelope. I waited until I was in my car before I opened it. My hands were not entirely steady. Inside was a single folded piece of paper, plain white, no letterhead. The handwriting was printed rather than cursive, deliberate and neat, like someone who did not want to be identified by their natural script. It said, check his second phone. Do not confront him yet. That was all. 7 words and a warning. I read it 3 times. Then I sat back and looked through the windshield at the empty parking lot, and I thought about every time Garrett had stepped outside to take a call. Every time he had placed his phone face down on the table. Every time he had laughed at something on his screen, and then turned it away before I could see what it was. Every single small thing that I had filed away under perfectly normal and moved on from. If you're still with me, we're family now. Drop where you're watching from in the comments. A second phone. The question was not whether I believed it. The question, and this is what kept me sitting in that car for 20 minutes, was who had sent that woman to me. And why Lorraine? Because my sister and I did not have the kind of relationship where she would send someone to warn me. If Lorraine knew something about Garrett, the more likely move, the Lorraine move, would be to sit on that information. To hold it. To use it at a moment that served her. Unless she had a reason for wanting me to know right now. Unless the warning was not entirely for my benefit. I drove home. I cooked dinner. I sat across from Garrett at the kitchen table, and I watched him eat and talk about his day. And I smiled at the right moments and I said nothing. I had always been good at being still. People mistake stillness for passivity. It is not. It is simply a decision to wait until you know what you are dealing with. Over the next several days, I watched. I am not proud of it, exactly, but I am not ashamed either. You do what the situation requires. And the situation required observation. Garrett had a habit of going to bed after me on work nights, saying he liked to wind down with a little television. I had accepted this for years without question. But now I noticed that he sometimes took his phone with him when he left the bedroom to get water. I noticed that he kept his jacket in the car more often than usual. I noticed that when his phone rang during dinner one evening, he glanced at the screen and then set it face down and said it was just a work contact he would call back later. You know something is wrong when a man starts treating his phone like it contains classified government information. Garrett was not a secretive person by nature. He left his laptop open, his emails unguarded, his wallet on the kitchen counter. The phone behavior was new. And new behaviors in a person you have known for 9 years stand out like a scratch on a clean wall. On the 5th day, I found it. He kept a small zippered pouch in his home office, tucked inside a larger canvas bag he used for travel. I had seen that bag 100 times. I had never had a reason to look inside the pouch. That afternoon, while Garrett was in the backyard taking a call on his regular phone, which already said something, I went into the office, unzipped the bag, and opened the pouch. A phone. Black, slim. A model I did not recognize. No case. Fully charged. My heart was moving in a way I did not appreciate. I pressed the button, and the screen lit up. No pascode. Which either meant he was careless or he believed I would never find it. I was not sure which one made me feel worse. There were messages. Quite a few of them. All from the same contact. Saved under a single initial. L. I knew before I read a single word. I knew and my stomach knew and the room seemed to tilt very slightly to the left. I opened the thread. And then I stood there and read every single message, from the oldest to the most recent. And the story they told was not the one I had prepared myself for. There was no intimacy. No affection beyond what you might exchange with a familiar acquaintance. No declarations or longing or the particular language of two people conducting an affair. What there was instead was something that took me several minutes to fully understand, because my brain kept trying to map it onto a narrative it already knew. But once I understood it, I felt something cold settle into my chest that was far worse than jealousy. Lorraine had been talking to Garrett for over 4 months. And what they were talking about was my mother's property. I need to give you some background here, because this part matters enormously. My mother, Claudette Aldridge, has owned a modest piece of land on the outskirts of the city for over 30 years. It is not a fortune by any standard, but it is worth something, perhaps significantly more now than it was when she acquired it, given what has happened to land values in that area. My mother is 71, in reasonable health, but beginning to slow in ways that worry me. She has always said, and said repeatedly at family gatherings when the subject came up, that the property would be divided equally between her 2 daughters. What I was reading told me that Lorraine had decided she did not want to wait for an equal division. The messages painted a picture that I had to read twice to fully absorb. Lorraine had spent months carefully building a case, to Garrett, of all people, that I was not in a position to manage or maintain the property, that I had debt he did not know about, that I had made decisions in the past that indicated poor financial judgment. She was not asking Garrett to do anything dramatic. She was simply laying the groundwork, conversation by conversation, for him to become an ally, for him to be on her side when the time came to speak to my mother. She wanted him to nudge, to agree with her assessment, to be the calm and reasonable husband who gently suggested, at the right family moment, that perhaps a different arrangement made more sense. There were messages where she said things like, "You know how Maya gets when she feels cornered. It will be better coming from you." And there were messages where Garrett replied, not with resistance, not with "I do not think that is appropriate," or "You should not be speaking to me about this." He replied with things like, "I hear what you are saying, and let me think about the right moment," and, most damning of all, "I agree she would not handle this well if it came from you directly." He agreed with her. He was not having an affair with my sister. He was being used by her, whether he fully understood that or not, to help maneuver me out of my rightful inheritance. And rather than come to me, rather than say, "Lorraine has been reaching out and I am not comfortable with what she is asking," he kept a separate phone, he kept separate conversations, and he kept himself available to her plan. I put the phone back exactly as I found it. I zipped the pouch. I repositioned the bag. I walked out of the office, into the kitchen, and I poured myself a glass of water, and I stood at the counter, and I breathed slowly until the heat in my face had reduced to something manageable. That was when I made my decision. If they wanted to play carefully, I would play carefully. If they wanted to move in the background, I would move in the background. I was not going to confront Garrett that night with shaking hands and a cracking voice and give him the opportunity to minimize what I had seen. I was not going to call Lorraine and let her hear the emotion in my voice and know exactly how much damage she had done. I was going to do something far more effective than that. I was going to let them think they were winning. The next 2 weeks were the most controlled performance of my life. I was warm to Garrett. I was present. I cooked the meals he liked. I asked about his work. I laughed at his stories. I gave him absolutely no reason to sense that anything had shifted. And when Lorraine called, which she did, twice, I answered in the same unhurried tone I always used, and I asked about her life, and I let her talk, and I listened carefully to everything she said and everything she did not say. She mentioned, very casually, that she had been thinking about Mom lately, that she felt like the family should probably have a conversation soon about the future, about plans. Just to make sure everyone is taken care of, she said. That sounds like a good idea, I said. Why do not we do a family dinner? There was a brief pause. Sure, she said. That could work. I could hear the satisfaction in her voice. She thought I was walking toward the trap myself. While Lorraine was feeling satisfied, I was working. I called my mother and spent 2 hours with her over coffee, not talking about the property at first, just listening, just being present in the way I had not always been as consistent about in recent years. And when the conversation turned, as it naturally did, to the future and to the land, I simply told my mother the truth. Not all of it, not the messages, not the phone, not Garrett's involvement. Not yet. Just the truth of what I knew about Lorraine's patterns, laid out plainly and without drama. My mother is a perceptive woman. She has watched Lorraine her entire life. She listened without interrupting, and when I finished, she was quiet for a moment. Then she said, "I always wondered when this would come." That conversation led to another. And that one led to a meeting with my mother's attorney, which my mother initiated herself, entirely of her own accord. I did not push. I simply told the truth and let my mother be the intelligent and autonomous woman she has always been. By the time the family dinner arrived, things had already been quietly set in motion in a way that Lorraine had no knowledge of. The legal language had been updated. The arrangement had been restructured. My mother had made her wishes known in writing and in the presence of her attorney. What Lorraine had spent 4 months engineering had been rendered irrelevant. The dinner was at my mother's house. A Sunday, mid-November. The kind of evening that feels like it should be peaceful. Good food, warm light, family around a table. Garrett sat beside me. Lorraine sat across from us, next to her boyfriend, and she was in a particularly good mood. Light, animated, attentive to my mother in the careful way she performs when she wants something. I watched her. I watched Garrett. And I waited. The property came up before dessert, as I suspected it would. Lorraine introduced it with the practiced ease of someone who had rehearsed the moment. She framed it as a concern. A loving and practical concern for our mother's peace of mind and for the family's future. She spoke in the warm, measured tone of a person who believes they are the most reasonable one in the room. And then, right on cue, Garrett spoke up. Gently. Reasonably. Agreeing that it was a good conversation to have. Suggesting, in his calm and likable way, that perhaps some things were worth revisiting. I let him finish. And then I set down my fork and I looked at my sister. Lorraine, I said. Before we go further, should I be worried about the second phone? Or would you rather start with the documents? The table went quiet. Not the comfortable quiet of a pause in conversation. The sudden, airless quiet of a room where something has just shifted. In a way that cannot be undone. Lorraine's expression did not fall apart immediately. She is too controlled for that. But I watched something move behind her eyes, a rapid, internal recalculation, and I saw the exact moment she understood that I had known for some time. Garrett turned to look at me. His face had gone very still. Maya, he started. I have read every message, I said. I kept my voice even. I was not going to shout. I was not going to give either of them the comfort of watching me lose composure. Every single one. I know when the conversation started. I know what was asked. And I know what was agreed to. I turned to Garrett. I looked at him directly, the way you look at someone when you want them to understand that you are not performing. You are not exaggerating, you are simply telling them the precise truth. You did not just keep a secret from me, I said. You made yourself available to be used against me. By my own sister. And you said nothing. He did not answer. There was no answer that would have helped him. I turned back to Lorraine. You have spent 4 months trying to build a case that I am irresponsible and financially unstable. You went to my husband rather than to me because you knew I would see through it immediately. You tried to get into this family's future, through the one door you thought I was not watching. She opened her mouth. I continued. Mom has already spoken with her attorney. The arrangements have been updated. Whatever you were planning to present at this table tonight no longer applies. My mother, to her quiet and enormous credit, said nothing. She simply looked at Lorraine with the expression of a woman who has finally stopped being surprised. Lorraine's composure held, but only barely. The warmth she had performed all evening had gone somewhere, I did not know where, and I did not care. She said something about me always dramatizing, about it not being what it looked like. About families having every right to plan together. I did not argue with her. There was nothing left to argue. I am not angry with you, Lorraine. I said, and I meant it. Anger requires surprise, and I was done being surprised. I am just done pretending I do not see what I see. The dinner ended shortly after. Lorraine left early. Garrett and I drove home in near silence and had the long, painful conversation that we had needed to have for weeks. It was not easy. Very little that is true ever is. He told me he had convinced himself that Lorraine was only trying to help the family, that he had not thought of it as deception, only as keeping the peace, that he had not realized how far it had gone. I told him that understanding your own motivations is not optional, that, I did not think about it that way, is not the same as being without fault, that trust is built or broken not only in dramatic moments, but in every small choice a person makes when they believe no one is watching. We are still married. I want to be honest about that, because a story like this can seem like it should end in walking away, and I understand why. But 9 years is a history, and histories are not erased by a single failure. What we are building now is something more honest than what came before. He knows that I see clearly. That is, perhaps, the most important thing a marriage can hold. As for Lorraine, we have not spoken since that evening, and I find that I do not miss the performance of the relationship we had. I miss the sister I thought she was, back when I was younger and less observant. But that sister, I think, never quite existed outside of my own hoping. And the stranger in the café, the woman who sat down beside me without ordering anything, who placed a white envelope on the table and walked out before I could ask her name. I never found out who she was. I have thought about it many times since then. Someone who knew Lorraine. Someone with a conscience. Or perhaps with her own reasons for wanting the plan to fail. A loose thread in a scheme that Lorraine had assumed was airtight. Whoever she was, I am grateful. Not because she saved me. I want to be clear about that. I did not need saving. What I needed was a reason to start looking. And she gave me that. The rest was mine to do. That day, I did not lose my marriage. I did not lose my inheritance. I did not even lose my sister, really, because what we had was never quite the real thing. What I lost, and this is the part one think about the most, is the comfortable illusion that the people closest to you are always who you believe them to be. And what I gained, standing at that kitchen counter with a glass of water and a decision forming quietly in my chest, was something I had always possessed but rarely trusted completely. I trusted myself. Fully. Without apology. Without waiting for permission. And that, in the end, was the only thing that mattered.